Welcome to Keep It Electric with Tremayne Person, episode 55. This recording is taking place on Friday, September 20th. As of today, the Seattle Mariners hold a 78-75 record, sitting 5 games back behind the Houston Astros in the AL West. With just a handful of games left in the regular season, the pressure is mounting, and the Mariners' playoff hopes are hanging in the balance. We've got a lot to unpack today. If there's one thing the Mariners have a knack for, it's chaos ball. Whether that works in their favor or against them, it's become a signature style. Now, chaos ball, if you haven't heard the term before, was coined to describe the way the Mariners play. It's their brand of taking risks, pushing the limits with aggressive base running, and sometimes relying on a little bit of small ball tactics. That edge of your seat style can lead to thrilling wins, but as we saw in the series against the Yankees, it can also come back to bite them. From the very first pitch of Game 1 to the dramatic ending of Game 2, the Mariners found themselves in the thick of chaos. And unfortunately, this time it didn't quite fall their way. There was drama, there was tension, and some questionable decision-making that left fans shaking their heads. Yet despite the frustrations, this is the brand of baseball that has kept them competitive for the last couple seasons. Today we'll dive deep into what exactly went down during this series, what went right, what went wrong, and how those tough losses might impact the Mariners' playoff hopes as we head into the final sprint of the season. We're talking everything from the crucial moments that defined each game, to the errors and missteps that cost them key runs, to the silver linings that still give fans reason to hope. The margin for error is razor thin at this point, and every decision is magnified. Could this series be the wake-up call for the Mariners as they chase that elusive playoff spot, or was this just another chapter in their story of chaos ball? Stay tuned because we're going to break it all down right here. Let's jump in. One of the biggest talking points this series has got to be Game 1. It set the tone right away and really raised the question we were all thinking about going into this matchup. What would the Mariners do if the Yankees start putting runs on the board like we know that they can? And unfortunately, we didn't really have to wait long for that answer. Right out of the gate, in the top of the first inning, the Yankees wasted no time jumping to a 2-0 lead. It was a classic Yankees start, aggressive at the plate, taking advantage of every opportunity and reminding everyone just how explosive their offense can be. For Mariners fans, it was a gut punch, especially considering how important every game is at this point in the season. The Yankees set the tone early, and it felt like the Mariners were immediately on their heels. But what makes this even more of a conversation starter is what happened next. As the Mariners came to bat in the bottom of the first, this was the moment that really set the tone. Could the Mariners respond? Could they keep pace with the Yankees team that's been red hot and ready to score at will? The Mariners knew they couldn't afford to let this game get away from them so quickly, but as we saw, that didn't really go as planned. Diving into a bit of a head scratcher here, pitch number 1, Luis Gil throws a two-seam fastball that runs inside and nails Victor Robles right on the knuckles. Clearly unintentional, Gil just lost the grip on it, and you could see that both players had a moment of acknowledgement. Robles was clearly in pain. Gil gave him that sort of my bad gesture, and they both embraced. The game eventually moved on, but what happened later in that inning, it just went off the rails. Fast forward, the Mariners load the bases with Justin Turner at the plate, full count, 2 outs. It was the 3-0 count, 2 outs. And what was probably the most baffling move I've seen recently, the baseball internet exploded about it. Robles decides to try and steal home. Now, before I completely drag him for this, let me just play devil's advocate for a second. Robles wasn't entirely insane for attempting this. Luis Gil has been caught off guard on the mound before. He's not the quickest with his delivery, and Robles may have thought he had an opportunity to catch him napping. So on that level, I get it. I can see where his mind was going. He's thinking about making a big, game-changing play. But that's where the understanding stops. If he had just held on for one more pitch, there's a high chance Turner would have drawn a walk, and Robles could have strolled home without any drama. It was a 3-0 count. He was one pitch away. Instead, he gambled, and it didn't pay off. And look, I'll give Robles the benefit of the doubt that his mind probably wasn't all the way there. He'd just taken a fastball to the knuckles. He was battling through pain. It's possible his judgment was clouded in that moment. I mean, we all know he hasn't been in the lineup since that game because of that injury. So he was probably hurting more than we even realized that he was. But at the end of the day, you're a Major League Baseball player. You have to keep your head in the game if you're going to stay in the game. especially in a high leverage situation like this. Stealing home in that spot, it was completely reckless, plain and simple. It killed what could have been a huge rally. The Mariners were already down 2-0. The bases were juiced, and they had a chance to really shift the momentum back into their favor early in the game. Instead, Robles' gamble completely deflated the energy. The Yankees got out of the inning unscathed, and it just felt like all the air was sucked out of the Mariners' dugout and out of the ballpark. Now, to be fair, I'll say this. If it had worked, we'd be having a totally different conversation. If Robles somehow managed to pull off that steal, we'd be calling him a genius. We'd be calling him a spark plug. We'd maybe even be calling him a hero. There's always the element of hindsight in baseball where we judge decisions based on the outcome. And yes, it was close. Luis Gil, I keep calling him Gil because it's Gil, but Gil did a good job recovering and making a solid throw home to get Robles. But it was a bang-bang play, a couple of inches the other way, and we're praising Robles for its gutsy call. But the thing is, it didn't work. And because it didn't work, it goes down as a bonehead move. The decision flipped the script on the game. The Mariners were never quite the same after that play. The momentum swung hard in the favor of the Yankees, and from that moment on, it was an uphill battle. In my opinion, that ill-timed steal attempt set the tone for the rest of the game. It was a big swing and miss at a crucial moment, and unfortunately for Robles, it's the kind of mistake that lingers. You can't afford to make that kind of misstep this late in the season when every game, every run, and every decision is magnified. Robles was trying to make something happen for sure, but in that situation, you have a veteran like Justin Turner at the plate. You have to trust the process and you have to let things play out. It was a high-risk, low-reward move, and it definitely cost them. All in all, I do respect Robles. I do respect his hustle and his drive to make something happen there, but it just wasn't the right time to make that play. And looking back, it definitely had a ripple effect on the outcome of the game. Now, before we dive into another big moment that happened in Game 2, I've got to take a minute to talk about Juan Soto. This is probably where I give him his flowers, unfortunately, but it's the truth. Because after a conversation, like I've had some conversations with some friends and some of my like baseball group chats, and we've all kind of agreed to this. It's become very clear, and maybe some of you listeners can agree as well, that like I'm not sure that I've seen any batter, not even Ohtani, not even Aaron Judge. I don't know if I've ever seen a batter impact a game quite like Juan Soto. And here's why. He doesn't have to hit home runs. He doesn't even have to get a hit to change the dynamics of the game. Just him being in the batter's box is enough to completely throw a pitcher off their rhythm. We saw it in the first matchup against Bryan Woo. Soto forces a walk, and Woo completely unravels from there. And that's the thing with Soto. It's not just his physical ability to hit the ball, it's the mental warfare he plays with pitchers. Night in and night out, he forces them into these mind games. When he steps up to the plate, the pitcher knows that they're not just trying to get him out. They're trying to keep from making a mistake that could set off a chain reaction. And what happens if he gets on base after a long at bat? Next in line, you've got someone like Aaron Judge. You got someone like Jazz Chisholm Jr., who's always been a really good player, but he's suddenly hitting at a 300 clip since batting behind Soto and Judge. You also have Austin Wells to consider. Like, all those guys are more than capable of blowing the game wide open. And that's the real danger. Like that's the real danger, and that's what happens. That's the real danger that Soto brings. He puts the pitcher through the mental ringer and leaves them vulnerable for whoever's coming up behind him. Now, I've also got to give Bryan Woo a lot of credit. He's a young pitcher who's still finding his footing. His track record against tough lineups isn't bad at all, but the Yankees, led by a guy like Soto, they're just too big of a challenge for him right now. Woo tried his best in Game 1, but you could tell that mental battle wore him down, forced him to throw a lot of pitches and make some critical mistakes. And again, that's the impact of Juan Soto. Whether or not he gets on base, he's laying the groundwork for the Yankees type of chaos. He's the guy who starts the avalanche, and before you know it, the Yankees are all over you. So let's just be real about Soto. His value, it's already big. It's going to skyrocket this offseason. He's going to be a very rich man, and whichever team gets him, whether it's the Yankees who sign him or someone else, they're going to be getting a player who can single-handedly change the complexion of an entire lineup. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we're talking about Soto as a guy who helps carry the Yankees to the World Series. His ability to change the game without putting the ball in play is just next level. The mental games he forces pitchers into is something that few players in the league can even match. He is unmatched in that lineup. In the future, I think Wu has the potential to dominate lineups like the Yankees, and we've seen him do it before. I don't want to take anything away from him or from his performance. Right now, he's still learning, and when you're facing a team like that, the learning curve steep is really fast. Soto was a spark in game one, and if the Yankees make a deep postseason run, I think we'll look back and realize he's the one that lit the fire. The Mariners, by definition, were definitely tough luck losers in game two, but it was a legitimate battle. This game had the same energy as the classic Cole-Gilbert duel from a couple years back, just outstanding pitching from start to finish. And speaking of impressive pitching, Bryce Miller put on a clinic. He showed incredible poise and resilience on the mound, especially when facing off with one of the most dangerous hitters in the game, Juan Soto. It was super impressive. Each time they squared off, it felt like must-see TV. Soto may have gotten the better of him in their first two encounters. He forced a walk in his first at-bat. He doubled in his second at-bat. But then in the top of the fifth, that was a turning point, and it was absolutely incredible to watch. It's a full count, 2 outs, tension's building, and Miller is staring down Soto. He just unleashes an absolute sick sinker. It was perfectly placed on the bottom left corner of the plate. It was an absolute dot. Miller froze Soto right there. You could feel the energy shift in that moment. It was one of those pitches where you just sit back and you just say, wow. Honestly, it might have been the best pitch I've ever seen Miller throw in his young career. And that's saying something, especially considering like where he fits in this rotation and the rotation's reputation for precision. I had no idea he could dot a sinker like that. It wasn't just the pitch that made it so special. After he struck him out, there was a stare down afterward. Miller gave Soto a taste of his own medicine, meeting his gaze as he walked back to the dugout. It was one of those moments that just screamed confidence, showing that Miller wasn't intimidated in the slightest. He rose to the occasion in a huge moment during a tight game, and it was really impressive stuff from the young pitcher, really preventing that chain reaction that could have happened if Soto had gotten on. Moments like that are also why we love this game. The tension, the drama, the showdown between two elite competitors, and even though the Mariners couldn't pull out the win, the battle between Miller and that lineup, that's one that we should be continuously talking about. Now, the game ended 2-1 in extra innings, but not without one of the most frustrating moments involving Julio Rodriguez and a bad base running play that's been just as much of a talk as the Victor Robles incident in game one. If you weren't watching or haven't seen the highlight yet, let me just break it down for you. In a key moment, bottom of the 10th, Randy Arozarena is at the plate. He strikes out swinging. Julio is on third. But here's where things get a little sideways. Arozarena strikes out swinging. He loses his grip on the bat, and it goes flying in Julio's direction. Now, Julio is leading off third base at this point, and instinctively, as anyone would, he jumps out of the way, trying to avoid getting hit by this bat that's literally flying towards him. The bat's sailing towards, I believe it turns towards the Yankees dugout, and Julio, understandably, is trying to avoid getting injured. You can see that he's just being human in that moment and reacting as anyone would to avoid danger. So he's jogging away from the third baseline. And then that's when things get a little tricky, because in the chaos of avoiding that bat and Julio jogging away from third, he's probably thinking the play was dead, or at least not realizing that the ball was still live. And that's when Jazz Chisholm Jr., who's manning third base, saw what was happening. He stayed sharp, called for the catcher to pick him off. The Yankees capitalized on Julio being out of position, and that turned into a strike him out, throw him out double play. Just like that, the Mariners' rally came to a screeching halt, and it was a pretty deflating moment for the team, as now they're down 1 with 2 outs in the bottom of the 10th. Now, I know a lot of people have been quick to criticize Julio for this. I don't think it's fair to throw him under the bus. And here's why. Let's be real. If you're standing on third and a bat comes flying at you, your natural instinct is to get out of the way. Julio was just trying to avoid getting hurt and get out of the way. And in the heat of the moment, he probably wasn't thinking about the fact that the ball was still live. That's just human. So honestly, I think if you put a lot of young players in that situation, they'd probably react the same way. Julio's still young. He's a star, but he's also human. So that wasn't some boneheaded, careless mistake, in my opinion. It was a split-second decision that most people would have made. And you could tell right away that Manny Acta, the Mariners' third base coach, he's been around forever. he knew what was happening and recognized the error. And when he tried to get Julio to kind of snap back into it, that there was a baseball game happening, it was a little too late. So, yes, it was a mental lapse. No question about that. But let's cut the guy a little slack. He's been nothing short of just, I don't know. I don't want to say he's been great because he's definitely a roller coaster, but the guy he's been clutch for this team a little bit more recently. You got to give him that. And this was a tough moment, but it doesn't define him. I don't think we should have this moment define his season. I think a lot of people think it sums up the season for Julio Rodriguez, but I don't think it does. We've seen what he can do. He can be a game changer, and this was just one of those moments where the game caught him off guard. He made a very human mistake, but that doesn't take away everything else he brings to the table. The third game of this series was probably the most normal in terms of pace and structure. For the Mariners, it was exactly what they needed, a solid win to close things out. The Mariners wasted no time to getting after Clark Schmidt, who had just came off of 2 really solid starts. The Mariners put up 3 runs in the first inning. They were fortunate that those 3 runs held up for the rest of the game as they went to win 3-2. Jazz Chisholm did hit a 2-run homer in that game. But even though the score stayed tight, the Mariners played with confidence and executed well when it mattered the most. Logan Gilbert, as usual, steady presence on the mound. He gave the Mariners 5 innings, 5 and a third innings with quality work, keeping the Yankees hitters off balance and making key pitches when he needed to. I'd say there's something about Logan's consistency this season that just gives the Mariners the extra bit of confidence when he's on the mound. Sometimes I think it hurts him, though. He's probably the best 7-11 pitcher, well, I guess 8-11 pitcher there is out right now. He's just always rises to occasion, and this game was just no different. I think the biggest moment in this game came from Luke Raley, who, by the way, was celebrating his birthday. He made the most of it. He came up with a massive run-saving throw from right field. He gunned down the Yankees outfielder Jason Dominguez at the plate. Dominguez was clearly trying to make up for the error he made in the bottom of the first. That misplay allowed the Mariners to score. To be fair, Dominguez was right to take the risk on going home on that single. It was still an aggressive play, and you can respect the hustle, but the stars aligned for the Mariners in this one. Raley's throw was right on the money. It gave Cal Raleigh a chance to put the tag on him, and honestly, I think it's almost fitting that it was Dominguez who got thrown out trying to fix the very mistake that led to those first 3 runs in the inning. So this win feels like a positive turning point for the Mariners right now, especially coming off a tight series against a tough Yankees lineup. The fact that they found a way to grind out this win, relying on strong pitching and clutch defense, says a lot about where the team's at right now. They're finding ways to win close games, and that's a great sign as we head into the final stretch of the season. As we close out today's episode, let's look ahead at what's on tap for the Mariners. They hit the road tonight for a pivotal 3-game series against the Texas Rangers. If you remember, they just faced Texas last week, took 3 out of those 4 games. 3 of those wins were nail-biters, and the final game was a blowout. Tonight, we're in for a real treat with George Kirby facing off against Jacob deGrom. Either pitcher can change the course of any game, so this is a really marquee matchup. Tomorrow, Emerson Hancock is slated to take on Max Scherzer, another exciting duel, and then on Sunday, it'll be Brian Wu going up against Andrew Heaney. This Texas series might seem like an easy task on paper, with the Rangers being all but mathematically eliminated from the playoff race, but I wouldn't get too comfortable. The Rangers have nothing to lose at this point, and I'm sure they would love to play spoiler for Seattle's playoff hopes. The Mariners cannot afford to take their foot off the gas in these games. The Mariners are still 5 games back behind the Houston Astros for the division title. Houston's in a series against the Los Angeles Angels, who sit in last place in the division. While it's a tough ask, we'd love to see the Angels pull off an upset or two, but realistically, catching the Astros at this point seems like a real reach. The more attainable goal for Seattle is the wild card, and they're 2 games back from the third spot of the wild card, currently being held by the Tigers and the Twins. Minnesota is still on a rough skid, and they're opening a series against the Red Sox, so that's going to be pretty unpredictable. On the other hand, the Tigers are on fire. They've won 4 straight. They're starting a series against the Baltimore Orioles, who are struggling, and they just swept them last week. The O's they did come off like a huge victory yesterday. They really needed that one, but Detroit has been playing exceptional baseball. I think the most interesting thing about the Tigers right now is that they've really adapted their pitching strategy. They're going with openers most of the time, and they've been doing that a lot recently. They're starting relievers and then bringing in long relievers after an inning or two. It's unconventional, but it's been working really well for them. Uh, when you try to look at their pitching rotation, it's basically Tarek Skubal and then the others. It's almost like they're reimagining the role of their bullpen to just maximize their efficiency. They're also getting production from players who were hitting under the Mendoza line before the All-Star break. Suddenly they're just lighting it up. So we've seen teams catch fire late in the season before, and the Tigers, who could probably use Jack Flaherty right now, they're looking like one of those teams. They've been, I think you could compare them to the Rangers from last year. I think you could compare them to even the Diamondbacks who went on a run last year. When you've got a hot hand going into October, anything can happen. And while the Mariners are still in the hunt, don't forget the Tigers hold the tiebreaker over Seattle. So it's not just about catching up to Detroit. The Mariners need to surpass them by a game in order to leapfrog into that third wildcard spot. The series against Texas, it's critical. There's no margin for error, and the Mariners, they really need to string together some wins. So these next few games could really define their season. As we watch Kirby take on DeGrom, Hancock take on Scherzer, and Wu take on Heaney, let's hope the Mariners can build some momentum from their most recent win. Every game counts, and they've got to go all in if they want to see postseason baseball. Thanks for tuning in to Keep It Electric. We'll see you after this Rangers series to break it all down and look at where the Mariners stand in reference to the playoff race. I hope everyone enjoys their weekend. Until next time, keep it electric. Go Mariners.